Hello, everyone. Welcome to MECCA Moments for June 12th, 2020. Why do I have a problem every week saying the date? It's just, that's what happens in quarantine. You just don't, I mean, the date is literally right in front of me, and I still can't get it together. Today, we're talking about activism and advocacy for mental health providers. We have Zamantha Gobourne and, of course, Dr. Mercedes Ebanks from the MECCA Group. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm so, come on now, it's Friday. It's more energy, right? It's been a long week, right?
Yes.
Been a long week. Been a
long week. Dr. Ebanks, would you like to introduce our guest today?
Yes, I have the pleasure of introducing Zamantha Gobourne. She has been with the MECCA Group for about a year now, serving as our program manager of service special contracts. But we have known Zamantha for a number of years. She has rejoined us because previously she worked as a consultant through her practice of Gobourne Behavioral Health and Counseling, where she serves as a psychotherapist. She employs cognitive behavioral therapy to meet the unique needs of each of her clients. She has experience in corporate America as well, which really complements her people-based strengths. Ms. Gobourne is a licensed independent clinical social worker and a licensed graduate social worker in the District of Columbia and in Maryland. She provides services in individual, family, and group counseling to adolescents and adult clients. And she received her Bachelor's of Arts through University of District of Columbia and a Master's of Science in Social Work from Columbia University School of Social Work. And now she is working on completing her PhD in social work at Widener University in Chester, Pennsylvania. So welcome, Zamantha, and thank you for being part of the MECCA team.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Thank you.
That was pretty good. So let's get right into it because we have a lot to talk about. Advocacy and activism in terms of social workers, licensed counselors, mental health professionals. What does that really mean, Zamantha?
Well, across the board, I mean, as a social worker, that's our foundation, right? Our mantra is meeting with the client where they are and making sure that people have the right to self-determination. When you talk about advocacy and activism, you're talking about being a change agent. You're talking about helping people, supporting them through a process. And in this context, what we're talking about here today is in mental health specifically. So when one advocates for a person, you're bringing a message that says, okay, you know what, mental health is okay, and you're not alone in this journey. And it's the effort to destigmatize what mental health, what people perceive to be mental health in the community. So it's really about meeting people where they are. It's supporting people through the process, and it's helping people to be vocal about something that is typically something that they're embarrassed to say out loud.
We've talked for several years about the stigma in many communities of color, especially Black and Brown communities. How does advocacy help reduce and minimize that stigma?
Because it helps because you're looking at somebody and saying, hey, you know what? It's okay. So from my perspective and in my practice, the one thing I love about all the clients that knock on my door and that I interface with, they're very vocal about, you know what, I have a therapist. And I've watched it firsthand become infectious, whether it's a family member or a friend that says to them, you know what, you seem like you're making some strides in what you're doing. And so they'll ask more questions. They'll inquire about, well, how do I go about finding a therapist? So to break it's having the conversation, it's saying it out loud, it's and sharing with your neighbor, sharing with your family. And again, it's become infectious, and I've watched it firsthand. As a matter of fact, one of my clients, how I actually decided to really become an open advocate for mental health. I mean, I've always been for it, but as a therapist, it's like, okay, well, I have to protect confidentiality and a person's right. And so, we were walking down the street one day and he started introducing me his therapist. And I was like, well, why are you doing that? And he was like, because I want to destigmatize this. I want people to know that, it's okay to have a therapist, especially as a Black and brown person. So that's very important. It's important for everybody to have access to mental health, but Black and brown people, that is true. There's this, take it to the church. And, even in that, people are feeling guilty. Like, what, I have to put my faith before my mental health. And you don't have to put your faith before mental health, and you don't have to put mental health before your faith. They can coexist and they serve different purposes. Mental health is an intervention. Going to seek help and someone advocating and helping you support the process is the intervention. How you treat the problem when you're, trying to figure out, why do I move about in the world this way? Why do I show up this way? Why do I talk this way? Why do I always feel angry? Faith and prayer, that's your coping. So they can go together. But I like to tell people, it's no different from if you have a heart problem, you see a cardiologist. If you have a foot problem, you see a podiatrist. So, if you're not able to really understand how, what's going on internally, and you don't have an emotional vocabulary, then, mental health, seeking help from a professional is very important. And so going back to your question, it's about talking about it. It's saying it out loud, and it really does become infectious.
So let's talk about the different types of advocacy. What are the different types and categories of advocacy?
There's self-advocacy. That's, getting yourself educated, understanding your triggers, understanding your coping skills. I like to say it's working inward and then outward. You can't really support people in their process if you don't really know what's going on for yourself. And then there's individual advocacy. It's, supporting a person along the process. It's very one-on-one. And then there's system advocacy. That means, working, promoting yourself, or joining a cause, if you will, to get systems to change and to look different. Back in the day, I think historically, when people had issues, they would be institutionalized, and there was a problem, or you never knew somebody had a problem or had an extra family member because they were locked up in the sanitarium. Right. Let's call it what it is, right? So systems advocacy is about even destigmatizing the systems, how we treat people, service delivery. What does that look like? Are we getting equal access to resources and to good health care, and mental health?
So how do you become an advocate? Can you explain that to us?
I think anybody can be an advocate. Mm-hmm. I think it doesn't look like a certain thing. So again, going back to what I said earlier, my clients are advocates. They are having conversations with their family members. They are having conversations with friends. I'm an advocate. I can talk to my colleagues. If you want to get into legislation, you can advocate that way. I think it's finding your comfort zone. It doesn't look one way. It can be joining a hotline for suicide prevention or domestic violence. So it doesn't look like one thing. I think it's about figuring out what you really want to support, what cause you want to support, what your goals and objectives are, who's the target audience that you're trying to reach, who are the players that you really need to get in contact with so that you can really advocate for change. So it doesn't look like one thing. I think it's starting within and going outward. What's your objective? So if we give it context, if we look at what's going on right now with all our protests, people are doing things in different ways. Some people are the foot soldiers and they're down by the mall or down by the White House. Then you have people along 15th Street who are holding up signs, or there's people who have medical tents up. So everybody plays a role, and I think we have to respect that from an advocacy perspective. It does not look like one thing. Or people, Mercedes and I were talking the other day, and she was like, we need to become more conscious, and she's more conscious of where she's spending her dollars, and that's powerful. So How does one become an advocate? I think it starts with a question of self. What are you trying to achieve? And also, what are you willing to sacrifice? Because advocacy is about sacrifice. It's not, it's not something that you do behind closed doors. And you really have to have a goal and an intention, and take it from there.
Yeah, thank you for first distinguishing the difference between the different types of advocacy. And I think as mental health providers, that's part of our training, is to really advocate for our clients, advocate to get rid of the stigma, advocate for services for, students, to children, to adults. However, can you explain a little bit more regarding activism? Because I think that is more of a movement now, especially during these very trying times, that I see mental health professionals really getting into activism and not just advocacy.
I think that's, and you and I talked about, I think one of the reasons I'm really not, my thing is not being in front of the camera, but because of all of what's going on, I'm like, you know what, I need to do more. So activism, first person for me, is about modeling for my clients, right? That's most important for me. I believe in change. I believe in self-determination. I believe in empowerment. And so I can't just, be a Monday morning quarterback. So it starts with me trying to model for my client. And activism is also getting that awareness out right now. So if we're talking about COVID, if we're talking about race relations, if we're talking about George Floyd, I think we have to be activists right now. It's very critical, because this is going to be a long-term problem that's going to affect all of what's going on in the world right now. If we want to frame it, it's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Grounded in trauma. And so what we do know, the research shows us, is that people of color, people in general, but more so people of color, you know what, there's a stigma, but for those who are vested in getting help, a lot of times we don't have access to resources. So we need to get out there, and we need to promote this. We need to, Taraji P. Henson, you have people who are coming up with programs and access to services, because we know what, there's a need out there. So activism is about filling the void right now. It's about education right now. It's also about holding our colleagues accountable. There's a private citizen self. There's how are we stepping out to raise awareness in the community. Did that answer your question, Mercedes?
No, you certainly did. And thank you for clarifying that, because again, I think as part of our training, as I said, we're taught to help to guide others. And that does not just stop once the session is over. We have to really believe in our craft. We have to be invested in the larger community, not just that individual client. So you can advocate for a client in terms of their rights, their, need for services. But the activism really comes to speaking about, I need to do work to help others like this client, not the one individual, but the community, about the group as a whole.
Yeah.
Zamantha, you asked me before the program started what my role was in this space, and actually I'm a mental health advocate. That's what I put on everything. So I really wasn't paying attention. I was trying to get ready, but it's exactly the title that we're talking about. Because I don't practice. I went to Howard and did the counseling psychology, thing, and worked in therapy, but that's not my space. My space is talking about mental health to the masses, and speaking out a bit against social issues around mental health and mental wealth, health, and hellness. And hellness. That's where we are. Hellness. Mental hellness. That is exactly what's going on. That's my new term. Mental hellness.
Are you
mental wellness, guys. And so yes, mental advocacy. That's what I do. And activism, that is such an important role, and a lot of people are becoming activists for the very first time in their lives. And so this is good information for them to hear that, it's really about sacrifice. If you're not sacrificing anything, what are you actually doing? If you're not stepping outside of just, lip service, and not willing to risk something, then who are you really serving? I think that's a great point that you make.
Excellent.
Okay, so let's look at how can you become, what informs your role as an advocate, and how can you that guide your process into becoming an advocate?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Well, in the context of mental health, and I think everybody here can say it's not being ashamed to say that, what, out loud, mental health is important. And that's going to guide it. And so if you want to send that message and you feel passionate about it, what does that look like? And again, it doesn't look like one thing. And so it's, who's your target audience? Do you want to serve an adult population? Do you want to serve women, children? It's thinking about your target audience, number one, what your goals and objectives are, in terms of your activism. What are you trying to achieve? And what that's going to look like, it's going to be on a micro level, is that going to be on a macro level? And then figuring out, who do I need to plug into, or what systems I need to plug into, what resources I need to plug into. What's my foundation? Do I need money? Or in this case, we have social media. So I think what you're doing is great and much needed. So somebody may say, hey, you're not practicing, but you had an idea and you were like, okay, let me figure this out and let me do it in another form, just as effective. And so I think those are the things, and it's going to look different for everybody. What's going to be effective for you, and what are you going to be committed to, and what's going to be consistent. And I think it's a collective effort. I don't think it's one person doing one thing. I think we just have to look at it broadly, and we have to have conversations. And especially as mental health professionals, there should never be a divide between social workers, psychologists, LPCs. We all serve a purpose, and we have to come to the table as colleagues and have conversations about what we do, and collectively how we can, support the individual and the larger community.
Zamantha, I remember when we had a discussion on Monday, we talked about that that split or that divide between our role as a mental health professional as well as an advocate, and what happens when we may get assigned a client that has different views on society than we do, and how we have to, as mental health providers, not be biased, how we can't place our feelings and our beliefs onto the client, but really help them to explore their feelings, their thoughts, and make them feel comfortable. Because you may have a client that comes to you that has complete opposite views, and you have to treat them where they are and not where you think they should be. And I think that's really important to discuss. Can you, elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's a trigger for me, right? That's how I ended up in this seat having this conversation today. So, Mercedes and I were talking about, or Dr. Ebanks, I apologize.
No.
I'm very passionate. Another reason I'm in front of the camera is because, I'm part of a lot of different groups for clinicians of color, in general. And so I think, I don't get to tell everybody how to feel, and there's a whole lot going on, and everybody has their feelings. However, when you decide to become a mental health provider, there's your private self, your private citizen self, and there's your professional self. So do I have my feelings, by what's going on in the world? Absolutely. So I have to deal with that. I have a therapist who has a therapist, and we should all, as a therapist, have a therapist. I put that somewhere. But when I come to the door, I have to put my professional hat on, and I have to show up for my client, and I have to be very intentional with that, regardless of what the client looks like. So I'll call it out. I don't believe that if you're not I saw a post the other day, and someone said all Black people need a Black therapist. And I responded and I said, no, all Black people need a competent therapist. So, there's this thing that, racism doesn't exist among Black people. That's what's called colorism, racism amongst ourselves. So, and just because you're Black or a person of color or Afro-Latina does not mean that you are culturally competent.
Exactly.
And we have to be able to call our colleagues out on that. The same way we're saying to the police force, if you see your colleague, doing something wrong, then call them out. Well, as a mental health professional, I'm saying to my colleagues, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't say to someone, hey, you're in treatment with someone who's, a white person, you should leave therapy because they don't understand your plight. First of all, that's just unethical, right? You don't know where the person is in that process. So in that, I can get that raw feeling, right? Like, you know what, we just got to protect ourselves. However, that's why I said you got to make the distinction as a private citizen. Let me do what I need to do to gather myself. And take a break from practice. If I felt like I really needed to do that because I couldn't separate it, then I would do that. We really have to abide by ethics. And, figure out, like, hey, get yourself healthy. And when you can come back and recover, then do that. And I think that that's okay to do, even having that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're doing exactly what you support your client to do, wellness. So we have to have those tough conversations, not just with our clients, not just with the larger community. We have to have it at the same level with our colleagues, and be careful about what we're putting out there, and you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
And that leads to my next question regarding self-care. But even before that, the reality is, even in the field of counseling, it is only 4 to 6% that is made up of African-American counselors. So we are still a very small percentage of the field as a whole, in terms of the psychology workforce. So that we want clients to receive services. And as you said, they should be competent. They should be culturally competent. And in, training programs like at Howard University, we train our students to be able to work with a diverse population of clients. Not that they're only going to service African-American clients, but they are going to service Afro-Latinos. They are going to service white clients. They are going to service, clients of different sexual orientations, of clients of different, religious backgrounds. And that has to be part of the education and the training. And then moving forward regarding self-care, how important is self-care to a person who's a mental health therapist, who's also an active advocate, and also doing work as an activist?
That we have to try to make a list of what our coping mechanisms are, right? And let's be clear, there's good coping mechanisms and there are bad coping mechanisms. And in the wake of COVID, we've had to make adjustments to what we normally do. So, and it's interesting that I tell my clients, you make a list of coping mechanisms, but you have to make a conscientious effort to engage. It's, and say, you know what? First of all, it's building your emotional vocabulary. Today, I'm feeling tired. Taking a moment to check in with yourself. How am I feeling? And if I'm exhausted, obviously my needs are not being met. So what is it that I need to do to, what measures do I need to take to have my needs met? Does that mean talking to somebody? Does that mean going, a brief walk, maybe not a long, extended walk, a brief walk, reading a book, listening to music? A lot of technology is out there now for free. In the wake of COVID, you have calming apps, so it's thinking about that, and again, it might look different. It is frustrating that it's not going to look like what you want it to look like, being able to go to yoga or being able to go out and dancing. However, it's important because you have to detox. Let's call it what it is. This is all trauma, right? And it's multiple traumas, right? It's a lot of trauma happening at one time. Typically, trauma is dealt with later, but this is real time. And so it's like this dual consciousness, and we're asking people, you know what, be a private citizen, be a mom, be a husband, be whatever it is that you are in your private household. But then at the same time, you know what, you got to deal with all of this that's going on, and you know, you got to explain it too. You know, you explain COVID, you got to explain you're Black in America, and you got to explain you lost your job. You got to explain like domestic violence is on the rise, child abuse and neglect is on the rise. You know, alcoholism is up. You know, there's a whole lot going on. So, you know, first of all, let's just deal with what's in front of us. How about that? So self-care out. Once you deal with what's in front of you, say it out loud, your lived experience, and understand that's that conscious state of how I'm experiencing this. Self-care is very important because where we are right now, it's a lot. And it's not at one time. And we don't have the time to say, you know what, I'm all right. You know, I'm good. It's this push through mentality that I see showing up in therapy all the time, especially for Black and brown people. You know, it's like, oh, I'm all right, I'm good, you good? Yeah, I'm good. You know, there's like 30 wishes for good. You know, but what does that mean? Because that's very vague. And unless you understand what that means and say it out loud, then you really don't know how to address it. And you internalize a lot of stuff. So getting back to your question about self-care, it's super important because of all of what we are ingesting right now. And that's going to be unique to everybody. And I want to underscore that there's danger in telling people how to feel, right? So people say, oh, don't feel that way. You know, it's just not that bad. No, allow people the space. Self-care is also about giving the space for people to just acknowledge where they are, you know, and that looks like different things to different people.
True. Very good. Thank you.
While you have me on a roll?
I know. Keep going. Keep going. I know you can speak on this for hours.
I wanted to talk about the definition of lived experience, right? And I wrote it down intentionally because I think it's important for people to understand that we're all going to experience this very differently. And so we don't get to tell people how to feel. And also, there's no shame in honoring where you are. And you know, again, we talk about activism and advocacy. If you're not out there in front of the White House, that's okay. You know, I was talking to one of my nieces the other day, and she was like, you know what, I'm doing my activism on social media. And I'm like, all right, cool. You know, but even if she did it, I don't get to judge that. A lived experience refers to an individual's conscious experience as experienced from the subjective or first person point of view. And so it's unique to everybody. And it's just a space that we have to respect. So before you can get to racial trauma, you have to first deal with your lived experience and what exactly is going on with you.
Yeah. And like you said, that may look different for everyone. You know, even within the same household, that looks different. And I know a few weeks ago, we also discussed the need to validate a person's feelings. Like that is very important, to be able to listen and validate the person, how the person is feeling about a situation, about their trauma, about their lived experience. It's to acknowledge that this is how they felt. This is not a time to criticize, question, ridicule, you know, doubt or anything. It's to say, you know, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's what, again, mental health providers do with that unbiased opening, you know, and being very genuine, is that we invite people in to be able to decompress and to be able to share what they feel they can't share with others, you know, so.
I'm glad you said that. I like the way you frame that, because I think you and I both know that people have preconceived notions about what therapy looks like, right? So that's even more of a reason for us as colleagues to come out and be activists and advocates, because people have this preconceived notion that it's really what they see on TV. But I really like the way you framed it. And I'm hoping that gives people some insight into, you know, possibilities.
So along those lines, there's a question from Michelle Coghill Chapman. She says, is there a training that is needed to become a mental health advocate, or can we serve in that role in our family or community informally? What would you say to that?
I don't think you need training formally. I think, well, no, I don't think you need formal training. I think anybody can be an advocate, right? Again, it goes back to what is your intention. However, I think it's dangerous if people are out there giving information about mental health, like an intervention, if you're not a trained and licensed professional. So, a lot of my clients, actually all of them, they'll say, hey, do you know anybody? My friend is looking for a therapist. So from that standpoint, it's access. They're advocating, and they'll tell me, they're like, oh yeah, I told somebody, yeah, you need to go to therapy. And so they'll come and ask me, and I'll say, okay, I'll look around, I'll ask some colleagues, or here's some resources, go on this website, go on this website. So I don't think that you have to be trained. I think that you just have to know your lane. I have colleagues who are life coaches. They're not mental health professionals. However, they can advocate about mental health, in their lane. So I think we have to first start with what is our lane and what is the intention and who's the audience and who do we need to plug into in terms of decision making.
And along with that, I would certainly say there are a plethora of resources to tap into. So if you can't go through a formal training process, there are a number of webinars, there are a number of other resources to be able to kind of give guidance and suggestions on how to advocate. And like Ms. Gobourne was stating, the different types of advocacy. Where are you in your walk to be able to promote the different types of advocacy, and what that looks like. Advocacy doesn't necessarily always mean that you have to be on the front line. You could do some of the field work. You can volunteer. You could provide, monetary contributions. You could do other things, donations. So there's other ways that you have to figure out what works for you and that you can commit to. Because I think that's, the concern, even with during this time in this movement, is this prolonged? So advocacy and activism, as Zamantha stated, is a commitment. Is this going to be a lifestyle rather than just a trend? Yeah. And what do you want to do and how do you want to walk that? And it could progress, and also it could degress, in terms of you do a lot at first, but now you're realizing it's a lot on you and it's too heavy. Once life goes back to quote unquote normal, as they say, and you can't do it the same way, but is your commitment and your heart still the same to do some sort of work in that area?
Did we lose Brandon?
No, hope not.
I don't think
the internet. There you go.
I think my internet, something's happening with the internet today on this platform. But you're going to definitely have to come back and give us some more, some insight about advocacy and activism, and answer some questions, because this was a great conversation. And in this time, we all need to advocate for ourselves and each other. And we need some tips and tricks on how to deal with mental illness.
I like it. Like I said, I'm going to steal that from you. I'll borrow it.
So with that, as Brandon is frozen, I will close out today's segment. Thank you for being first a part of the MECCA team for so long, for doing all the work that you do. And Zamantha is certainly a therapist who's very inviting and very, relaxed in her method of providing services. And I think that's what's very important, in that we at the MECCA Group is find a therapist that fits your personality, that fits, that fits you, not, it's like, picking a doctor and picking that right dress or picking, that perfect pair of jeans, it has to fit. So sometimes you may have to go through a trial, but not to give up on mental health, services, because we all need that, need it at some point, because as Zamantha stated, we could all be experiencing some sort of trauma right now, and we don't know the impact that this can have, in the months to come, in the days to come, as more things are surfacing. Every day there's something new. So I want to thank Zamantha. If you could please provide, resources, and we'll post it on our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel, so that if people need to get in contact with you or get in contact with the MECCA Group, they can do so.
Thank you. Yeah, I can do that. But people can find me on Psychology Today, just by my name. Working on my website, or Gobourne Behavioral Health and Counseling. So, and I just wanted to say thank you. You pushed me off the ledge.
That's okay. That's what we do. We support one another.
We support one another, and and it's important because it's a very important topic. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for doing the work. Thank you for certainly doing the work.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. So this has been a MECCA Moment, and have a wonderful weekend and week to come. And we'll be back next week with our topic on Juneteenth will be on financial empowerment.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Yes.
Everybody have a good weekend. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.